Bushcraft 412, and I wanted to share with you guys kind of my new hobby. You know, I'm always looking for new things to do and new little things to collect and buy, and you know, sometimes it just gets tiresome buying all ammo, all knives, and buying the same things over and over again, or food for preps, or things like that. So I kind of wanted to branch out a little bit, and I kind of, you know, found a cheap little hobby that makes me feel better, and plus it's just a neat little thing being, you know, I'm getting to that point in my life where I'm getting ready to start a family, and, you know, I'm looking at things that I can kind of share with my kids when I have them, and this I thought was a really neat idea, and plus there's a lot of local history involved in this. So what I'm doing now is actually I'm collecting vintage knives, and in particular I'm collecting New York knives. It turns out New York was like the biggest manufacturer of knives 50 years ago. You know, K-Bar, of course, a New York company. Ontario, a New York knife company. Camillus, which is now gone, unfortunately, was a major New York knife company, one of the biggest knife dealers in the world. On top of that, you have the Walden, Schrade, you know, when Schrade was making knives out of Walden, New York, and the Catskills. And there's a bunch others as well. I believe there's Cattaraugus Knife, which was making knives up until I think around the 50s, maybe 60s. They made a commando knife for World War II that's actually very collectible, which, you know, maybe like an hour, hour and a half from where I live right now. As well as there's Cutmaster Knives, which is actually still in business to this day in Utica, New York. But they've been making knives since, I believe, the 20s or so, maybe even longer. And then there's Pal Knives, which was out of Plattsburgh, New York, up near Canada there. So we had all these knife manufacturers in New York 50 years ago, and nowadays we're down to, you know, K-Bar, Ontario, and Cutmaster is still in business, but they really don't. You know, when was the last time you saw a Cutmaster knife in the store? But what this is right here is this is actually my collection of Camillus knives. Camillus, actually, at one point I lived maybe 5 miles from the Camillus factory, and I just think it's a really neat part of New York history, being Camillus was making, you know, they made the K-Bar. You know, Camillus made, was it like, I think close to 2 million K-Bars for World War II. They made the jet pilot survival knife that went up until, you know, the Vietnam War. They made a lot of big military issue knives, as well as these military issue folders, which I have a review on this. If you go into my page, I do have a full review on one of these, but I picked up a second one now. We're not going to get into that. These ones here, this one is a Camco. If we can get this to focus. As you can see, the shield says Camco on this. This is basically a low-end Camillus knife. They used Camco for a while. I don't know why we're not focusing. But it's tough to see. You can see a little bit in the light there where it says Camco on it. But I guess they started using the Camco name in 1938, and I'm not sure when they stopped using it. But this is just your typical four-way knife, where it's got the can opener, bottle opener, screwdriver, you know, folding knife. You know, of course, it uses a slip joint where, you know, you pull them out and they snap open, but there is no lock holding them. They didn't lock. You know, they just close back up. You know, times were different, and people, you know, didn't use their knives like they do nowadays. But I just think it's neat to see the construction of these knives and how they're different. You notice a lot of these knives have the lanyard hooks on the end, which is really kind of neat. This one is, I'm not sure the age on this, but this is also a Camco. So it could be 1930s up till whenever, you know, they may have stopped using it in the 70s, 80s, who knows. But the cool thing I like about this one is you can see there's a government stamp on this blade. So this is probably a military issue electrician's knife. And this one's really stiff. I gotta definitely get in and clean this bad boy. But I'll pull out the other one for you just so you can see, because I think this is kind of neat. It's a screwdriver. Of course, look at the size of that. It's a big, gigantic screwdriver. You never see that in a knife. But this actually has a very early liner lock. As you can see, there's actually a liner lock. I've never seen one on a knife this early, but I just thought that was cool, that you see your liner locks in it. They were actually using them back then, when most, the main blade's a slip joint, but really cool. No age on this. I can't tell the age. I'm not an expert in these. I'm learning a lot. Every day I'm reading more and more about these knives. But my guess is, 1960s, 1970s on this knife. But I know there was a lot of these that were World War II issue electricians' knives. This one here I picked up for maybe like $3. Kind of cool. Just nice the way to see how technology's changed. Here's just a little two-way, opener. Also a Camco. This one's probably more like 1970s. It seems pretty recent. But very cool. And I just, I like the idea of passing these down to my kids, or, maybe my niece, my nephew, because, they're a big part of our history, and that nowadays most knives are made overseas. Most knives are made in China, to be honest, and these were knives that were made in America, and people took great pride in them, as you can tell, because, the blades are actually stamped with the manufacturer, and these military ones have the date stamped into them. This was a different time and a different place when we cared about the things we made and took pride in them, and and knives were considered a tool, above all. They weren't really like nowadays. Knives are a little more what's the word? They're a little more flash than anything. People treat them as, how do they look? They want these powder coated, nice coated blades and a nice tactical look to them. Back then, people just wanted a good solid pocket knife, and I think this is great to show how times have changed, and I really, look forward to getting a good handful of these knives to pass down to future generations so they can see, where we were and the kind of things that we made in New York. Because those times are changing, and, who knows, 10, 20 years from now, K-Bar in Ontario may not make knives in New York, and all this stuff may just be a memory, and I think it's a really cool thing to collect, and I look forward to passing them down and kind of sharing information. And like I said too, this is something I'm brand new at here, so I'm going to be learning more and more about this as we go along, and as I get more and more knives, I'm going to make a few videos and show you how the collection's going. But hey, if there's any guys out there who collect, the old Camillus, or have any good info or anything like that to share, feel free to send me a message, because I'm definitely looking for people to learn from and people who know more about this stuff. So hope you guys enjoyed, and if you guys got a little spare pocket change, might not be a bad hobby for yourself to pick a knife company near you that maybe you grew up near or something like that, and start picking up those old knives that are laying around and keep them for those future generations who aren't going to have nice American-made knives.